everybody, I'm Jay Scherr with Jay Scherr Business Consulting. We help entrepreneurs, business owners, and other leaders maximize their potential, build rock-solid foundations for their businesses, and create more freedom in their lives. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. Simon Sinek said, "The true value of networking doesn't come from how many people we can meet, but rather how many people we can introduce to others." Well, on today's episode, we're going to talk about how to become a power connector, the 5 plus 50 plus 100 rule, the mental barriers that can hold us back, cracking the funding code, and more. My guest is a business thought leader who is known as the woman with the titanium digital Rolodex. She's a best-selling author, a TEDx and keynote speaker, advisor, investor, and a startup funding expert. She served as the CEO of both public and private companies and in management positions at Fortune 500 companies. She was ranked number 9 on Global Guru's list of the world's top 30 startup gurus, and she's been profiled in popular media outlets such as Forbes, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, and the Huffington Post. Please welcome the woman who has collected over 400 pages of quotes and who's encouraging all of us to kick fear to the curb, Judy Robinett. Judy, it is so great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today.
It is a pleasure, Jay. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I am so thrilled about our conversation and can't wait to dive in. So let's get started here. I thought first a good starting point would be for you to share with all of us what your favorite thing is about yourself and why.
Oh, goodness. Well, I just turned, 71 on March 9th, and probably in hindsight, my favorite thing is my love of learning and desire to share that knowledge with others so they can have a very successful life.
I love that. The love of learning. That's a wonderful attribute to have. And so I want to talk about that love of learning for a moment because, we have experiences in life that teach us some pretty valuable lessons, right? We carry those and pull many of them forward. At least we hope we do. We hope we learn from those experiences. So if we were to go back in time, what is one of the most valuable lessons that you learned about yourself early in life that you have carried forward?
I've had some profound kicks to the head, honestly, Jay.
Mm-hmm.
And in my 30s, I was giving a speech at MIT and read a Wall Street Journal that said, here's the 5 ways to become financially independent. Be a doctor, a lawyer, inherit it, marry it. And I thought, those are out. And number 5 was start a business. And I thought, how hard could it be? And dumb me, I did a franchise restaurant. Pretty successful, did over $1 million annually in sales, but finally at year 8, I thought I was going bankrupt and went to a bankruptcy attorney just shaking in my boots. I was so afraid. And he said to me, you're not even close. And I said, but I'm broke. And he said, listen, Judy, they can break you, but they can't eat you.
Mm.
And I just, it helped me put steel up my spine, and I was able to turn that around and sell it. And then started working with other troubled companies, helping them. And then eventually became an investor and helped working with startups. So that one was really profound. I think everyone experiences fear, but if you realize there are very few things that can kill you. And so you have to be very careful in your assumptions as you move forward as a founder or as an investor.
So what was it specifically that you learned after you had left that meeting with the bankruptcy lawyer and you were able to turn this business around and then sell it? What did you learn about the turnaround aspect of the business, of that franchise, that you were able to then take those lessons and apply them in other businesses, if you're able to think through that?
Yeah, so it became very clear to me that there was no lack of resources out there. There's 369 trillion in global wealth, endless ideas, information doubling about every month, I believe they say now, and that I just needed to get locked into the right resources, which meant developing strategic relationships that were critical. So instead of depending on the franchisors and just a few key people, I actually, reached out to some other folks to gather their advice, and I applied it. And that was tough for me. I think it was easier for me to, not be kind of hard-headed, but I basically called the bank and told them I wasn't repaying the loan.
Wow.
I was very angry because they had threatened me. They had people calling me that didn't even know where the state of Idaho was.
No kidding.
And I just decided I wasn't going to let them, push me in the corner, that I was going to figure this out. And I think I really did think that something horrid would happen. I would be in jail. I would lose my house. And it wasn't true. It wasn't true. And I found out that, lots and lots of other people have had this problem. And that's true wherever you are as an entrepreneur. Lots of people have had the trouble of not understanding family offices or sovereign wealth funds or where those VCs or those angels are hiding. And so it's often what you don't know that gets you into trouble, but you have to be vulnerable enough to start talking to folks and sharing your story.
So it sounds like part of what you experienced or had, some of the work that you had to do, was on your own beliefs, almost changing your mindset to a degree. Beliefs is something that I heard that you had mentioned. So if we could, for just a moment, I would love it if you would share with us, to give some context, something that you believed about yourself early in life. I mean, let's go early in life, that you did find out later wasn't true.
Yeah. So, the big ones were that I thought I was dumb, fat, ugly, and wasn't smart. And the big one that I've learned was that I thought I was shy until I was 38. And so that really prohibited me from, reaching out. Well, the research shows if you've been raised middle class or below, the idea is you put your head down, you work hard, you don't ask anyone for help. People will see your good works and that'll come through. And I had found out that didn't work. And so I read, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and got much more comfortable reaching out to people. And, I think another one that held me back was the thought that it was just me that had these problems. They say when you're younger, you worry about everything other people think. And as you get older, you find out nobody was thinking about you. They were worried about themselves.
Exactly.
But I really did when I was younger. I didn't think I was smart. It's like, why would anybody want to talk to me? But my curiosity really helped me get over that, plus reading that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I made it a game, Jay, to try to talk to anybody anywhere. And I remember going to a really well-known restaurant in Salt Lake, and I said to my friend in the car, whoever pulls up in the parking space next to me, I'm going to get out and talk to, and I'll figure out how to have a conversation. Well, I looked, and they had Idaho plates. And so I got out and I said, geez, I'm from Idaho too. Where are you from? And, getting myself to just talk to strangers, I got over all fear of talking to anyone, anywhere, about anything. And I found out that a great gift you can give to others is your attention and caring and listening to them. You know, people will say to me, well, really, how could I add value to others? Because that's a critical thing. You know, you can share a book, you can, send information to them. But really at the heart of it is if you really listen is absolutely critical.
I 100% agree with you on that. And so, just for clarification purposes, at 38, is that when you read How to Win Friends and Influence People, or had you already read it, but something else transpired at age of 38 that was more of a catalyst or became a catalyst?
Well, at 38 is when I started the franchise restaurant. And I had read that book in my corporate. I'd worked for a couple of Fortune 50 corporations, and I had read that after seeing that everybody was getting promoted. And, here I was working hard. And I could see that the networking was critical. And so I read that book, and that's when I very first started, venturing out of my shell, I would say.
Okay.
And understanding how important that was.
Yeah, that is so interesting. I had a somewhat of a similar experience in that I had a difficult time communicating with other people and developing relationships, and had all kinds of limiting beliefs, let's say, early in life. And when I first started my corporate career, the company that I had gone to work for had asked me to attend a Dale Carnegie course. I had never heard of Dale Carnegie, and it was a Dale Carnegie course on human relations. And Judy, it changed my world. It exposed me not only to Dale Carnegie's writings, which were life-changing in and of themselves, but it really opened my eyes to how relationships are formed and how to stand up and speak in front of others, and just how to show up differently in the world. And it was so interesting. And I love the fact that that book entered your life as well, and that you started to try new things and basically push against what you thought was comfortable before to get out of that comfort zone and look obviously at where that has led for you.
Yes. And what happened, Jay, is I took it to the next step. And, people will tell me I'm just a great connector. I know all these people. But the reality is a big chunk of it is strategy. So I'll give you an example. One of my friends called me and said, we're going to have this panel discussion in Washington, D.C. We've asked Mark Cuban to be on the panel. Not sure if he'll come or not. And I showed up, and sure enough, there's Mark. And I'm thinking, wow, here's an opportunity for an important relationship. And I thought about it, and I got out my business card, and I wrote on the back, Mark, I've helped one of your portfolio companies out of Salt Lake City. Let me know if there's anything I can do. But during, and I decided I had to get his attention so he'd know who I was, because there were many of us on the panel. During it, he was talking about on Shark Tank how he just really spends so much time, listening and doing a fair amount of due diligence. And I leaned down the table and I said, but Mark, what about that pretty woman in the bikini that was in a boat that you said no to in 30 seconds? And he looked down at me and he goes, well, that was a scam. And when I got home, I flew into Salt Lake, and I landed. The portfolio CEO of the company in Salt Lake called me and said, I just got this message from Mark. And he said, who is Judy Robinett, and what can she do for me?
Oh, my gosh.
And
That's
so,
amazing.
it's important to, make an impression, but I moved it to kind of a level of strategy. And it's the same thing with, founding a business. And I call it playing 3D chess. If you're going to get funding, it is critical you have a powerful value proposition, the strongest story in the right room with the right people.
Such a fascinating.
And that takes some doing. And, one of the strategic things I do is help people build a powerful advisory board that will lend credibility, and investors will look and go, wow, if these people are involved, maybe I better look at this.
That
And
makes
so,
perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. So I want to dive into your book, How to Be a Power Connector. And you've already alluded to a couple of things here that are certainly key insights that are discussed in the book. And I'm curious first, what you see business leaders and entrepreneurs, startups, what are they not doing well when it comes to networking and building their network?
So often what I find is they stay within the same realm of their industry. And so, for instance, accountants will go to conferences with accountants, and they stay, and that's fine until they need a new job, right? And then they're in a panic on who are they going to call about a job. And, I talk in the book how important it is to have that 25 to 50, and actually you really just only need 25, maybe less, of people that have a diversity, that are across industries, that have connections to money, connections politically. There's hardly any business that doesn't have regulatory challenges, and people that you're going to need and that you want to know, and to be able to pick up the phone and call them.
So I want to go a little deeper on the strategies and how we can build a powerful network. But I want to also ask you, so we talked about some of the things that we don't do well, or that business leaders, entrepreneurs, etc., are not doing well when it comes to networking. What are some of the most interesting things that you see when you go to a networking event, or when you've been to networking events, that just leave you shaking your head? I'm just curious, and then I've got another question for you that ties directly to that, but I want to see what your response is.
So I don't often go to just networking events, but when I do, what I notice is a lot of people will be timid, like I was. I used to go late and leave early, and I would hang out by the food or somewhere in the corner because I didn't know anybody there. And, what I found that would really help that is to make sure you know somebody there. I mean, do your research on the group. Find out who the organizer is. Introduce yourself and ask them if they would introduce you to 2 or 3 people that you may need as resources. But,
Very good.
I was that person that was out hiding and didn't want to go.
Been there before as well. So as you began to become more confident and had a much better understanding of how to build relationships, and really leaned into that discomfort, if you were, when you went to an event where there was an opportunity to connect with people, and you saw someone else who was timid, let's say, or standing in the corner, and it was obvious to you that this was an uncomfortable situation, would you make a point to go up to that person and maybe share a piece of knowledge with them to help them?
Absolutely. And I've done this. I've gone up with my cup of hot chocolate that I drink and say, "Hi, I'm Judy. This looks like it's going to be a really fun event. Where are you from, or what business are you involved in?" And then I will be like their wingman. I will take them around and introduce them to people, and I will anticipate, what it is they need. And so, something else that's really important that is in my book, I learned that if you share your story, And then you ask other people, what other ideas do you have for me? And who else should I talk to? I mean, this is what's led me to, dinners at the royalty in Europe and being asked to panels, that had people like Mark Cuban and, Mark Burnett. So, if you learn how to, and then add value back to that person, then you become the go-to person. But yes, I frequently have done that. And, if you just pretend that other person is like going to be a friend or a close friend, and I've had people do this when they've been scared about going to job interviews. I said, you just pretend that other person is a friend, look them straight in the eye and say, how can I best help you? What challenges do you need me to resolve quickly? And you'll get hired.
I love that. So when someone is changing careers, and let's say they're completely changing industries, and I'm going to use a personal example. I was with a company in a particular industry for many, many years. All of my relationships that I had built were within that industry. So I left that corporate role, left the industry for another one. What advice would you give to someone who's listening right now who is either about to leave an industry, has started over again, and they almost feel like they're starting from scratch? What's a good starting point for them in terms of rebuilding their network and rebuilding connections or building new connections?
So the first thing I would have them do is get on the phone of the 25 strongest people in their network and tell them what's going on. And, ask them, what are their ideas? Who do you know I should talk to? And you'll be amazed. I often give speeches and people will, during Q&A will raise their hand and say, I don't know any investors. How would I get to know an investor? So I ask people by the show of hands, how many people in the room know an investor? And a third of the hands go up.
Wow.
And people are in awe. So, the network that you have now is probably powerful and has people that can help you, but you have to ping them and ask them for advice or introductions. The other thing that I would suggest to people is to make sure that you have gone to groups like the Association of the ACG. They're all over the nation, and they're kind of a CXO level organization. And they're across industries. And so there's people from every single industry in there. And the other thing is think about service providers like lawyers or, high-end accountants and high-end bankers. All of these people know a myriad of people in other industries. They represent other companies that you could, find a job with. I've had people find jobs by talking to their dentist and their doctor.
Great advice. Great advice. Just look for connections beyond what you would normally think of. So reach out.
Yeah.
Let people know your story, where you currently are, what you're looking to accomplish, and is there someone that I should meet, someone that perhaps you could introduce me to?
Yes.
And first and foremost, look for a way to add value to that person. How can I serve?
Yes.
How can I help that person?
Yeah. Always make it reciprocal. Is there anything I can do to help you? What's going on with your project, your business, your life?
Excellent. So let's because you've mentioned this, but let's get specific on what the 5 plus 50 plus 100 rule is. If you can just walk us through that framework, and as you're doing it, if you would also talk about Dunbar's law and how that applies to this framework?
Yeah, so this book is 10 years old, and I've learned a whole lot since I wrote that book, Jay. And so my original idea was that, what happens is we have our friends and family that are the closest to us. They're usually in that realm of, 5 to 10 people. And then as you get out to your weak links, people that you aren't that necessarily close to, those will have the strongest resources because everybody that's in your inner circle, they know everybody else. So it's just, absolutely critical that you move out. Now, since I did that book, there has been some research done, and it was published in the Harvard Business Review, and they looked at professional wealth managers who were pocketing commissions annually of $1 million plus. And they looked at them closely and discovered they didn't have any difference in education, no difference in the type of products that were being offered, no difference in socioeconomic background at all. What they had was 3 to 5 critical relationships that they could go to that would provide consistent clientele for them. So their customer acquisition model was robust. They didn't have to go out and look for clients all the time. And, they went to trust attorneys. So I always, talk about, making sure that you've got the right people in your network who can really help you the most. And I can get you that research and share. I can do it as I've got a little, top 10 networking tips that has information.
That would be outstanding. So could we call those power partners, for lack of another term? So critical relationships, sure. Power partners, those who are part of that web that can connect us with a much larger number of individuals.
Yeah. And, every industry has an ecosystem. And so you can think about, where do the people that you need, where do they hang out? Where do they hang out? And, another thing I think you were mentioning was, you're really limited. I had a guy, and he's close to being a billionaire now. He's in Utah, and he called me one day, and he's like, Judy, I'm going to send Christmas cards out to my network, and I've got 20,000 people in my network. And so I called him a few months, later that year, and I said, so how many of those people ever got back to you? And more importantly, how many of those people have ever helped you with anything? And it was 12.
Oh, interesting.
And so, quality is more important than quantity. And so, the research shows when you first meet a stranger, you're concerned, are they safe? Is this person not going to kill me? And that one's pretty easy to make. And the second one is a level of competency, which takes a little bit longer. But I always tell people, look for a third, and that's generosity. Because just because someone can help you doesn't mean they will. So you want to have people who are going to have your future, but they're also going to have your back, because you don't want to, life's actually too long to deal with bad actors that are, they call the dark triangle, narcissistic, Machiavellian, sociopaths. And so be careful on, building that network. Make sure it's people that really do care about you and care about what's going on in your life. You can pick up the phone and they'll answer the phone.
That makes perfect sense. So in terms of Dunbar's law, does that still apply today in terms of really the size of our network or how many people we can really manage in our circle?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, you don't have all the time in the world. You don't have all the resources in the world. So, it's really critical. And, I now tell people 25 max,
Okay.
just 25 people. And to look carefully, get out the paper and the pencil and write down people that come to mind that are in your network, and then look at them. And one of the mistakes a lot of people have is the people in the network can't do anything for them. It's not that they're not nice, lovely, wonderful people, but who can really help you when the chips are down?
And so let's talk about then, you already mentioned diversity within our network. Let's also talk about how we manage that network, how we maintain the relationships and keep the relationships current and keep the contacts current. So you talk about this obviously in the book. So what are some examples that you would give of someone who has a network of 25, let's say 25 to 50? How often should they be in touch with the contacts, and what is the best way to ensure that we are staying on top of our relationships, managing effectively, and always looking for ways to give back?
So, the most important thing is when the relationship is new. And so I tell people that you make sure that you reach out on LinkedIn, that you write them a thank you letter, and suggest a future time that you can meet or that you can talk. And if you can provide some value, like suggest a book or share an article, that's what I do. So after like a month of closer contact, people can be out of your orbit for 3 months. I mean, this isn't something like you have to get back to them every week or once a month. I've reached out to people that I haven't really talked to in a couple of years. But if you make a solid relationship initially where people say, this person is a good person. I mean, the joke in my network is I'll tell someone to call someone and they'll say, I don't know why, but if Judy said we need to talk. And so I will, and I do have a very good memory. And I'll watch for articles, like almost, daily. I'll find an article. Like I finally hired a personal trainer who I call Torture Boy, and am getting in shape. Well, this morning I found an article on how these football coaches are looking at the rear end of recruits to see their maximus gluteus, their butt, for their power, their ability. Well, my trainer had been talking to me about how important the glutes are. And so I sent him that article, and he wrote back this morning and he said, yep, it's all about the booty. Thank you. And he is in an organization that probably has, 50 trainers, and I'm sure he will share that with them.
Absolutely.
And so, people go, she's thinking of me, and it is something that's of interest to me. And I do this, I try to learn about people's families, their pets. What is more important than your family, your pets? And, if you pay attention to those kind of things, that'll put you in the upper 5% of relationships.
That's fantastic. So you mentioned that you have a good memory, and I could see where you're looking to regularly connect the dots, coming across an article, something that you read, maybe a book recommendation, things like that, because you're paying attention. You're asking good questions. You're getting to know people on a deeper level, not just surface, but families and anniversaries, birthdays, etc. Do you use a technology to help manage the information, the relationships, storing the information that you collect?
Not really. I've tried a few of those, and they're kind of like CRMs, and I haven't found one out there that I think is really great. It's really difficult. I really prefer LinkedIn. because you can put notes, you can, put information. Years ago, I moved to Salt Lake City when I became CEO of a small public biotech company, and I didn't know anybody. I'd never lived there. And within a few months, I'd been invited on TV, all kinds of things. And someone said to me, "How did you do this?" And I took Post-its on my hall wall and wrote the first connection I had, then the second, then the third. And I looked for patterns. And the patterns were, I had gone to a meeting with angel investors. And so I was able to network with, 15, 20 people rather than one-on-one. And and because of that, I do watch, like, when did I first meet this person, or who introduced me to this person? And you'll start seeing patterns.
That is so interesting. So was that wall covered in Post-it notes from one end to the next?
I think it only went out like 15, 20 people. I've actually got a picture. I can send it to you. And interestingly enough, President Johnson, Lyndon Johnson, did this when he was getting a bill through committee.
No
and
kidding.
He would put who he had talked to, and it was almost identical to what I had done.
Wow.
And, it's just a different ecosystem and a way to map it and make sure he was covering all the bases. And then it was interesting for me to look at the people who had gone out of their way to connect me to other people versus, those that, and, Adam Grant has a book on it, the givers are the takers. And that's why it's important on the generosity. And you keep track of those people, and you help those people.
Yeah, that is amazing. I want to stay on LinkedIn for just a moment. I'm sure, like you get LinkedIn requests all the time. And I don't know if I'm doing this the right way or not, so I'm asking this from a place of curiosity, but I'm sure it applies to many of our listeners and those that are watching as well. When we receive a LinkedIn request from someone that we don't know, and they may just say something like, they may not say anything, or they may say something as simple as, "Hey, I'm looking to grow my network with great people, would love to connect." Are you asking questions back? Are you selective in who you connect with? Do you connect with everybody? What is your particular process, and why is that process important to you?
It's really important to me because I always startled by, every once in a while, a person will just say, "Well, I just wanted to connect with you," and I'll connect. And then they send a follow-up saying, "By the way, I read your book and I got funded. Thank you." So, people who don't have anything on their profile, I don't connect with. But most people I will, but I'm a bit different because I'm an author of 2 books. And I've made it a point in my life's journey that I will help, people if I can. And I do. And people are always startled. I mean, a woman just recently wrote to me and she said, "I need, $5 million in funding. I read your book. This is the barrier I'm dealing with." And I wrote back and said, "Let's jump on a call. Let me tell you who the family offices and the angel groups around you, and maybe a little bit of strategy." And she was stunned. She couldn't believe that I would pick up the phone and call her. But I like doing that because I like helping people. And I kind of know that, there's no lack of resources. So if I can just provide a little bit of encouragement plus a little bit of strategy, that will often solve the problem.
That is so fantastic. That must have been just a game changer for that individual. And I love the fact that you're looking for ways to help others, and that's something that's in your heart, that you enjoy to do, that you receive so much value from doing that.
And I do avoid, like, the scammers. Like, I'll have people from India and I look at their profile and they're selling SEO services. And those I don't connect with anymore. I used to, and then 15 minutes later, I've got hey, don't you want to hire me as a personal? I'm a great personal assistant, or I could help you with your SEO, or your website sucks, and so I do avoid those, I must say.
Okay.
And everyone, once in a while, I get ones that are like, oh my gosh, I saw you online. You're like gorgeous, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but can we talk? And I know, that's a scam. So,
well, now that you're in the gym all the time working on your glutes, maybe you shouldn't necessarily avoid those.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I'm glad that you brought up that there are some that you will not respond or that you won't connect to, because for all of you that are watching and listening right now, certainly you've experienced this if you're using LinkedIn, where you'll connect with somebody and you instantly get a sales pitch. So for me, I am like Judy had mentioned, I will review the LinkedIn profile. I'll make sure that this seems like it's a legitimate connection. But if I'm connecting with someone, I'm looking for a way to help that person or to provide something of value to them. I'm not selling. I'm not pushing. You can typically tell when someone is trying to just sell you. And the issue is they don't know you. They don't know what your needs are. They don't know if you have any particular needs or if a solution that they provide would even meet your need. But first and foremost, which I think has been echoed throughout this conversation, is it's about value in giving and looking for ways to be a resource for others. And I believe in the law of reciprocity. Whether it comes from that person directly or not, be patient, but just do good. Just do good. Yeah.
Yeah. And, if I get those and they come back with the sales pitch, I just, disconnect. So I think Dunbar's number that, you're limited to 150 people you can maintain contact with is true. And you really don't need that many. But on LinkedIn, depending on what your goal is, with your business or with your life, because I've got, I could easily count many more than 150 people that I know that I could reach out to. Mm-hmm. But if you're, really building those key contacts, and I use the example of, I'm sitting in Franklin, Idaho, population 1,000, and I've got a neighbor who's a milk truck driver. And I go to him and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What other ideas? Who else do you know I should talk to? Versus I call my friend Regina Bronson, who's a vice president at Goldman Sachs in New York, and say, hey, what do you think? You can see what that outcome is going to be of, who you can talk to. And the neighbor is great. But you think about yourself and your goals and where you need to get to, and what people have got the resources that you need. And then you kind of work back and say, where do these people hang out? So there's, 300 angel groups in the United States. There's money everywhere. I went to a general partner, limited partner meeting last Wednesday in Salt Lake, and I sat by two different women who each manage funds of $2 billion, and the one next to her managed $1.5 billion. I mean, there's like 12 of us in the room, and multi-billion, and here's 12 people. And so, people often worry, and I used to. I mean, Jay, I didn't know a millionaire, I didn't know a billionaire, and now I've worked with many, many billionaires, but I didn't know any of those people. And what you find out is everybody's the same. And you find out everybody's got problems. The billionaires have got problems. I went to a private event in Southern California and met one of the top VCs in the world. And I said to him, what do you need? Do you need help with? And he goes, I'm putting on this AI conference in 3 months, and I can't find somebody with this expertise. And I said, I'll get that person to you. And so what happens is your network gets that quality up to 25 people. You can find an answer for anybody. Like, Jay, if I said to you, what's your vision, or what do you need to do in the next year? Who do you need to know? And we can do this offline. I can tell you. I mean, I can make the introductions that would tremendously change your trajectory. And people often say, if you don't want to do something, don't tell her you want to do it. I mean, this is as simple as somebody saying, well, I'd like to give a speech, or I'd like to write an article. And, what you find out is the other side, that is their problem. Like, entrepreneurs are worried about, asking people for money. Investors are frantically trying to find good deals. I mean, frantically. People call me every week, I've got 10 million I haven't placed. Do you have any good deals? And so your problem is somebody else's opportunity. And it doesn't matter what kind of job you do.
I absolutely love that. And again, for all of you that are watching and listening right now, so Judy is this power connector, right? She has an amazing Rolodex. She's looking for ways to help people. She can make the connections. You ask and you're going to receive immense value in return. You can do exactly the same thing, right? And the great thing about that is Judy, of course, outlines so many of the important factors and steps that we need to know to become a power connector, building a strong network and looking for ways to be able to add value to people's lives. And I think that last sentence that you said, Judy, that you are someone else's solution, right? You are the solution to someone else's problem. Think about that. Yep. That's huge.
Yeah. And most people want to help. Jay, if you ask, the research actually shows if you ask someone for help, they perceive you as smarter.
I think that's fantastic. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention Crack the Funding Code. You have already planted a number of seeds during this conversation, and it's so interesting how your two books, although two totally different books, there's a bridge between the two, right? Because you need one to be able to do the other, right? You need the connections, you need the relationships, etc. So it's really interesting how the approach that you took. Now, as I was doing my due diligence, and please push back or correct me if I'm wrong here, but did I hear that Crack the Funding Code was really supposed to be the first book, and how to be a power connector was going to be the second book?
Well, I was never going to write one. So, I sent a proposal to my agent, who came from one of those people that wasn't really close to me, that I said, I think I'd like to write a book. And he said, oh, geez, I know one of the top agents in the nation. And so I sent her a proposal, and she called me on the phone, and I was going to do it on how to get funded. And I had a list of 50 people that I would interview. Reuben Abraham, I'd met in Delhi, India, who raised George Soros funds, many, many people. And she said, Judy, how do you know these people? Oh, you went to Stanford or Harvard. And I said, no, I went to Utah State University. And she said, how did you do this? And I said, because I care about people, and I can figure out a path to help them. And she said, well, we need to do a book on networking. I said, not me. I'm not going to do a book on networking. It's icky. It's manipulative. I don't like people being used. She said, well, call it something else. And on a Friday, she called me and said, we're going to call it How to Be a Power Connector. And I've sent the proposal to New York. So get ready to get on a plane Monday to go to New York. And I just laughed. I didn't think the thing would sell. And we had proposals from 4 publishers.
Amazing.
And then, several years later, I thought, I've really got to help entrepreneurs, because, I'd meet these wonderful people that didn't understand, there's lots of books out there on funding, but they don't tell you the how to, and how critical the pitch deck and the pro formas, and then building that the pathway you need to an exit, coming up with a total funding strategy. And they didn't understand all the players. And I mean, the sovereign wealth funds have 9 trillion under management, Jay. That's like 8% of the global GDP. And these people are now, they're investing, of course, in VCs and into startups. But at this world, it really depends on your relationships. You've got to have those relationships, and then you've got to have that compelling, concise story. And now people want me to write a third book, and I think I may do one on wisdom. Like, people say, well, you need to do one, like anybody that comes to me with a problem, I can figure it out. I can figure out how to solve it. And I think I could do that. It's like almost advanced strategic networking.
Interesting. What a great idea. Well, so for all of you, again, right now that are watching and listening, we're of course going to link to how to be a power connector. We're going to link to crack the funding code. I just want to mention to everyone that if you're an entrepreneur, if you have a startup and you haven't already read Crack the Funding Code, run to pick up a copy of this book. It is so good. And Judy, you go into so many specific details on every area of funding, right? Looking at all the different sources of funding, which is amazing in and of itself, right? There's so many or a number of them that I had no idea even existed. But beyond that, creating your pitch deck, right? The do's, the don'ts, etc. The fact that there are so many resources available, where to go, how to do it, and it's all incredibly practical. And imagine if you had Judy in front of you that you could ask these questions to, what an incredible resource that would be. That book provides that incredible insight and knowledge that you need to get the funding to get your startup moving in the right direction. And make sure that you're coupling that with being a power connector and always focusing on looking for ways to serve and to add value into other people's lives. So, Judy, I'm curious today, what are one or two bigger questions that you're contemplating or asking yourself? Could be anything, personally or professionally, but 1 or 2 big questions.
Well, I had read a long time ago that the only way to understand human behavior was to read Shakespeare and the Bible. And now I've trekked off in Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment. And so I've been contemplating, about evil, Dante, the levels of hell. And so, you find as you get older, you start seeing that your death is imminent. But so I've been fascinated for many, many years on human behavior after getting a couple of brutal kicks to the head. Mm-hmm. One by a hedge fund with a company that I'd ran who'd put in millions, that called me and said, we love you, but there's more money to be made in this sector. You clean up the assets, sell them, we'll give you stock, and if you don't, we'll sue you and say you've committed fraud on every penny we've invested in you. Wow. This is why you need to do due diligence on every investor that you have. And talk about put fear up your soul. And so it's been troubling to me, the bad actors that I've met, and in times my stupidity. I mean, I've gotten in those situations a couple of times and figuring out how to avoid them. And I'm much better at doing that now. I look at all kinds of things. I once had a headhunter, internationally renowned headhunter, and I said, how do you avoid these bad actors? And she said, well, I look at little tiny things like, do they park in a handicap zone and they're not handicapped? And I said, yeah, but sociopaths will even go rent a dog so it appears they're empathetic. I said, how do you really know? And she said, I talked to someone who's known them for 10 years. And so I've been very fascinated with human behavior. My undergrad is psychology, my master's econ, which is a really good combination. But, the big questions, I'm just fascinated with human behavior.
Likewise. And we'll have to have a separate conversation offline sometime, because I really love to explore more about what you're learning there, because that's a fascinating topic, and also fascinating reading that you're doing right now. Deep reading.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good. So, Judy, as we are closing our conversation today, I would love it first if you would give all of us, including me, a challenge. What is one thing that you would challenge us to do immediately?
I would challenge you that every day you find a way to talk to a stranger. Even if you say, those are great shoes you've got on, or anything you want. Just challenge yourself to smile and say hello first. And then when you get, comfortable with that, then ask them a question and just see, what happens. And the second thing is I would suggest that you dream bigger, that you think about where it is you would like to be in 5 years, and what would it take for you to feel successful, and specifically, what are 3 strengths that you need to improve or utilize, 3 dangers that you need to mitigate, and 3 opportunities you need to pursue. And that will give you like 9 categories. And I'll send you, that isn't mine, it's from a book called The Question. And I have found that to be very powerful to do. And, for younger folks, I would say get a piece of paper, number from 1 to 50, put victory log at the top, and write down everything you're proud of. Like, I got a D in geometry, so I didn't flunk high school. I put when I made, $25,000 as a social worker, when I made $350,000 as a CEO. And, you need to review that, because it turns out that's the number one way to increase self-esteem. That we tend to be really hard on ourselves and knock ourselves up, and the world knocks us up. And so having that, but, think about those 3 dangers you need to mitigate, the 3 strengths you've already got that you need to maximize on, and 3 opportunities maybe you ought to be looking at.
This is so good. Thank you so much for sharing those challenges. I know I'm going to be taking you up on those for sure. So here's my final question to you, Judy. What is one of the most difficult decisions that you've had to make in the pursuit of the person who you are today?
Probably getting over being shy and corralling my optimism a bit. I tend to be overly optimistic on people and opportunities. And so I had to really be careful on doing due diligence. The 2 times that I got severe kicks to the head, if I'd have just asked a couple of friends, I'd have found out the one guy was litigious and had sued every single person he'd ever been in a partnership with. But I didn't ask. And so being more aware. And the one quote I would leave with you is from Oprah, and it is, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time.
Ooh, I love that one. Thank you for sharing that. And Judy, I want to thank you so very much for joining us today on Business Minds Coffee Chat. I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I appreciate your candor. I appreciate your wisdom. I appreciate you bringing your 2 incredible books to life, and hopefully a 3rd on its way. And I'm just grateful for you. Thank you so very much for adding value
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. And for all of you, thank you so very much for watching and for listening. And I do have a quick favor. Would you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts? Let us know what you thought about this particular episode with Judy. What is one particular takeaway that was most meaningful to you? So if you could do that, that helps us expand our reach and attract amazing guests just like Judy. And to listen to more podcasts, all you need to do is visit jscherbusinessconsulting.com, click that podcast button, and until next time, keep learning, keep growing. Make sure that you pick up a copy of Be a Power Connector and crack the funding code. Apply the lessons you learn, and we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care, everybody.